Welcome all to the Department of Energy's SBIR STTR Programs Office webinar. My name is Chris O'Gwyn. I'm with the DOE SBIR Programs Office, and I will be moderating today's webinar. Today's presenter is the DOE SBIR STTR Programs Director, Dr. Manny Oliver. Manny will provide you with a brief overview of the federal SBIR programs, DOE's SBIR STTR technology areas, and some of the aspects of the DOE application and awards process as it relates to this, the fiscal year 13 Phase 1 Release 2 funding opportunity announcement. We will conclude with a question and answer session, so you can either submit your questions to me now, or you can wait till the end of the webinar and you could submit your questions via text. Via that chat box at the bottom of your screen there, and Manny will address these as time permits here. And let me just state, if you do have a question relating to either the topics or the technical content of your proposal, go ahead and submit those questions directly to the topic manager listed in the topics document. You can find that topics document on the DOE SBIR webpage, and we'll have a link to that in the webinar as well. All those who are registered will receive a link to the slides and to the recorded webinar soon after today's presentation, so look for that in your email shortly after today's presentation. And the recorded webinar will also be posted on the DOE website probably Monday morning sometime. You'll find the link there to the recorded webinar on our Funding Opportunities webpage. So again, welcome, and now let's begin. Manny?
All right, thanks, Chris. And I will switch it over to the first slide here, I think.
There you
go. And go on to the next section. As Chris
Sir, your line may be muted.
All right. I'm sorry. Apparently, we hit the mute button there, so I'm going to start again. As Chris mentioned, we have three parts of the presentation. First, relating to the overall federal SBIR STTR programs. So I have a short section on that. And then I'll talk about the topic areas that are funded by DOE. For its SBIR and STTR programs. And finally, I'll talk more at length about the process for applying and getting grants through the program. So let me move on to the first section. Okay, so again, we'll start with the purpose of the SBIR programs. And again, this is true throughout the federal government. One of the things I want to point out today is I have a lot more content here than and again, the purpose of putting all the content here is if you want to come back and review this later, you can see it and won't have to listen to it verbally. But I'm just going to cover a lot of these topics, at a high level today, and you can dig back into some of the details later. So again, the original charter of the program really was to allow small businesses, to provide a set-aside for small businesses where it was difficult for them to compete with universities and large corporations in getting government R&D funding. And so here are the original charter for the program. I think since it was created in the early 80s, the program has evolved and to have a greater emphasis on commercialization. I think in the earlier years, the program did fund things that would look a little more like basic science. But with the increasing emphasis on commercialization, most of the work today is in the area of applied R&D. And again, I think if you want to compare us to what's available in the private sector, we are really in the seed stage funding. So really taking something from concept, or idea to proof of concept and finally to prototype is what happens with the SBIR program. So our award sizes are probably more comparable to, say, angel investments or investments from VCs who participate in seed stage funding. We are different from the private sector in that we, each of the agencies has its R&D missions and, does take greater risk to support those missions. In terms of how the program is run, there is a central administrator, and that's the Small Business Administration. You may see things referred to as the policy directives and annual reports, and those are issued by the Small Business Administration. There are two programs, and they are separate programs with separate funding. The SBIR program, Small Business Innovation Research, was created earlier in 1983. There are 11 agencies that participate, and currently the way the programs are funded is as a percentage of the extramural R&D from each of the agencies. So currently in FY13, that's 2.7%. STTR, and again, the major difference with STTR is that it does require the small business to collaborate with a nonprofit research institution. And again, for this year, 0.35% of the agency's R&D budget goes to STTR program. I think we did receive a question in advance asking about, the relative amount of awards and funding, and those do follow these percentages. So again, you can see the SBIR is the much larger program of the two. Next slide. In terms of the the budgets by agency, this provides for fiscal year 2012. The budgets in total, it's fairly large. There's about almost $2.5 billion in funds that go out through these programs. And you can see DOE is, DOD and NIH account for over 2/3 of the budget. DOE is kind of in the second tier. We represent about 7% of the budget. And in terms of how the programs operate, again, they are only open to small businesses. There are some restrictions, on the type and ownership of the small business. So, for example, they do need to be at least 51% U.S. owned. And the Small Business Administration defines a small business with regard to the SBIR program as one with 500 or fewer employees. I would indicate that the principal investigator must be employed with a small business. For SBIR, one other change with STTR is it does allow the principal investigator to come from the research institution. So if you collaborate with the university, for example, the principal investigator may come from the university. And again, one of the big stipulations with the SBIR and STTR programs is that no cost sharing is required. So when you submit an application for a grant, certainly we encourage cost sharing, again, where it makes sense for the business, but it is not a requirement for your application. And again, you'll see this reference, Phase 1, Phase 2, Phase 3, referring to the different stages of the program. So typically the first funding that goes out is a Phase 1 funding. The length of the program varies, or the length of the award varies by agency, but it will generally be in the range of 6 to 12 months. And a typical award size would be on the order of $150,000. For Phase 2, which is prototype development, that would typically last about 2 years. And again, typical funding levels will be around $1 million. The actual funding levels, again, will vary by agency. I'll talk a little later about the specific amounts that DOE uses. Okay, next I'm going to spend a little time talking about the technology areas that in the DOE SBIR program. And I'd like to start with a slide just looking at the DOE mission. And again, the DOE has really three main goals. I think most people will associate the R&D in our agency primarily with the first goal, and that is to transform the U.S. energy system to be one that's a greener system with less impact on the environment. And again, although that is certainly an important goal, actually most of our R&D funding does not follow that area. Goal 2 is really DOE, like the National Science Foundation and NIH, also contributes significantly to basic science R&D in the United States. And so a significant amount of our R&D funding is in that area. And finally, the Department of Energy does a lot of work with in the area of nuclear security. the department is responsible for building, for example, the nuclear weapons that are used by the Department of Defense. So we have a significant amount of R&D in this area. Most of that is not, provide an allocation to the SBIR program. It's kind of off limits to that. But there are some small elements, for example, our nuclear nonproliferation effort, that does contribute funds to the SBIR program. On this slide, I just wanted to give you an overview. It may be a little difficult to read, but again, there are 12 separate program offices within DOE that participate in the SBIR program. They're in that black outlined box. Our office, which is shown in the black box at the bottom, does provide administrative oversight for the program. I'll be talking about these 12 offices in somewhat detail, but again, they're really in three groups aligned with those three goals. Going from left to right, there's the nuclear security, the 6 programs in our Office of Science, and finally the 4 applied programs looking primarily at clean energy. I also wanted to point out, starting last year, that there is a new program within the Department of Energy, and that's the ARPA-E, SBIR, and STTR programs. Those are operated completely independently of the rest of DOE, so you would need to talk to them about they maintain a completely separate solicitations, applications, and award process. I just want to point that out, that there are those 2 separate efforts in DOE. And again, in terms of how we administer the program, our office, the black box at the bottom, again, we are kind of a central administrative office, so we issue the funding opportunity announcements. We will manage the award and selection process, but we do that in collaboration with those 12 DOE program offices I mentioned. That's really where the technical expertise lies. Those are where the program managers who develop the topics, who assign reviewers to your application and make recommendations for award. And finally, we do have one other office. If you are selected for award, you will work with our DOE Chicago office to negotiate and execute your grant. One of the things we like to encourage applicants, especially new applicants, is really to investigate the websites of each of the DOE program offices that you intend to apply to. I'm showing here the website for the Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy. And again, there's a lot of good information here. Many of the programs that host, for example, technical conferences will put up the conference proceedings, so you can see what's going on with regard to state-of-the-art R&D in those areas. So we would certainly encourage you to get information. If you're looking for information about non-SBIR funding opportunity announcements, you would also go to those individual program websites. So again, referring to the sort of clean energy technology space, there are 4 different program offices. I'll just go through each of them briefly. And on the right side of the diagram are the kind of R&D topics that you would see out of these 4 offices. I point out each of these offices listed here. These are the links if you want to go to their websites. The first is the Office of Electricity Delivery and Energy Reliability. You can kind of think of them as the smart grid office. And they typically have topics in the area of grid-level energy storage, as well as power electronics, and intelligence related to managing power on the grid. The second is the Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy. Again, this is one of our bigger offices. On the energy efficiency side, they look at improving efficiency in vehicles, buildings, and on the renewable side, funding a number of technologies: solar, water, wind, geothermal. Office of Fossil Energy, we still do a lot of work related to oil, gas, and coal. A lot of the R&D here is focused on either extracting some of those resources or converting those to energy in a cleaner fashion. So R&D such as carbon sequestration is funded out of that office. And finally, we have the Office of Nuclear Energy. And again, they're funding a lot of work in terms of improving nuclear energy technology, a lot of work related to instrumentation, as well as better materials, and even some more recently research related to the waste, the nuclear waste, and the maintenance of that waste after use. In the area of science and engineering leadership, again, I mentioned we have 6 offices in the Office of Science who participate in the SBIR program. I would point about 2/3 of the budget for the SBIR and STTR programs comes out of these 6 offices. We do have one office, Advanced Scientific Computing Research, that does fund work related to high-performance computing as well as high-performance networking. So this is really the primary area where that is funded. I would point out that many of the other offices, both in science and outside, do fund work related to modeling and simulation, even though some of that is funded here as well. Basic energy sciences typically fund some of the work related to a couple of categories. So there could be fundamental materials issues related to energy conversion, as well as state-of-the-art instruments to analyze materials to help understand them better. So a lot of the facilities at national labs, synchrotrons, as well as neutron and electron beam sources that help us analyze materials are maintained by and operated by the Basic Energy Sciences Office. So they're always looking for a lot of new technologies, detectors, sources related to that. Our biological and environmental research program, on the biological side, they are currently working most actively in areas related to the genomic or metagenomic basis for converting biological feedstocks into energy. So that is one area that does biological research in Department of Energy. On the environmental side, that work is both looking at climate research as well as research related to remediation of nuclear waste or chemical waste in the environment. And finally, the last 3 programs are really physics. Well, the fusion energy, of course, looking at developing fusion energy systems. So they're doing work in plasma science, materials needed for these fusion energy systems, and as well as diagnostics and detectors. And then finally, high energy physics, nuclear physics. Again, their primary mission is funding basic research to understand the nuclear matter as well as elementary particles. As part of that, they do fund research related to accelerator technology, detectors, RF components, and systems associated with developing that equipment. And finally, really accounting for about 5% of our funding in the area of nuclear security. There are 2 offices, Defense Nuclear Nonproliferation, responsible to make sure that there is no illicit transport of nuclear materials. So they do a lot of work related to, again, detection, both of the materials and even, detonation of nuclear explosions. The Office of Environmental Management is responsible for cleaning up many of the sites where weapons have been developed over the years. Again, they're mostly focused on remediation and decommissioning of those sites, and they fund research related to that. Okay, and finally, in the last section here, I will talk about the application award process. I'll go through our timelines. These timelines have changed, I guess, in recent years, and our emphasis here has been trying to compress, the timelines really on the selection side, but providing you with a little more time in terms of developing an application. So, starting at the phase 1 at the top of the diagram, today we give you about 3 months before your application is due. We start off by issuing topics about 3 months before the application due date. And again, we release those, and you can, again, start discussions with our topic managers. We issued a funding opportunity announcement, or FOA, about 2 months before the applications are due. And so at this point, you should be starting to seriously consider whether you're going to apply or not. We do have a letter of intent, or LOI, requirement, and that's due only about 3 weeks after the funding opportunity announcement is issued. For release 2 of this year, that'll be December 17th, so it's coming up pretty quickly. And finally, the application due date, again for Release 2, would be February 5th. We currently plan on taking about 3 months to do the review and selection, and we'll give you a notification at the end of that 9 months. And then you would be, if you selected for award, your grant would start about 6 weeks after that, after negotiating the grant with our Chicago office. And again, as I meant, for DOE, the Phase 1 budget period can be up to 9 months. For Phase 2, the process is similar. There are no topics issued because this is a continuation of your Phase 1 effort. So we will issue a funding opportunity announcement before your Phase 1 grant ends, just a few weeks before, and then your applications will be due about 2 months later. Again, we have a similar review and selection process, negotiation, and then your Phase 2 budget period, which would go for up to 2 years. We currently issue 2 different, we refer to them as releases a year, so for Phase 1 and Phase 2. And we've listed here the different DOE program offices that participate in those releases. Again, depending on the type of work you do, you may have an opportunity to apply twice a year, or if you're very focused on a more limited set of technologies, you may only be applying once. Again, our Release 1 for FY13 is already closed. Release 2 is the one, the funding opportunity we're talking about today. And again, here's our 13 schedule showing both Release 1 and 2. I would just point out that year to year, we plan to keep these dates approximately the same. So if you want to anticipate next year, also if you missed Release 1 this year and want to apply, the dates will stay approximately the same from year to year. The 2 things I wanted to point out is, again, we've already issued the topics for Release 2. The topic webinar was held the week of November 5th. And again, we had 2 webinars that week. If you missed that, and that was an opportunity for the topic managers to discuss their topic, those are recorded on our website if you'd like to see that. Again, we just released the funding opportunity announcement on Monday this week, following the webinar today. And the most important upcoming deadline is on December 17th, when you are required to submit a letter of intent. And I'll talk a little more about what is in that letter of intent coming up. Here's our Phase 2 schedule. Again, you're only going to be applying for this if you received a Phase 1 award in fiscal year 12. I would point out that as part of, somewhat related to reauthorization, we have made some changes. Going forward, if you get a Phase 1 award, for example, under SBIR or STTR, and you wish to switch to the other program, you can now do that. Previously, you had to remain with the same program. But you do have that flexibility now. So, for example, if you start out with an STTR and you find you want to put a little more emphasis on the commercialization aspect in Phase 2 and not spend 30% of your funds on with the research institution, that's now possible. Also, I would point out that we did make a change that your Phase 1 final reports would be submitted with your Phase 2 applications for FY13. So going through the process in a little more detail, agencies do their topics differently. Some have very broad topics that are, very brief, might only be a few words to describe the topic area. DOE uses, I would say, very focused topic areas. Our program managers who are funding R&D in these areas know where the breakthroughs are required, and they draft their topics around those breakthrough areas. So generally, our topics will be that focused. Some of them may be a little broader in scope, and you can look through them, but you will have to fit, your technology into these topic areas. At DOE, we issue grants. Some of the other programs issue contracts, but as a result of issuing grants, communication with our program managers is more open. When the topics are open, and I'll mention when the funding opportunity announcement comes out as well, you are permitted to email and telephone the program managers. And then, as I mentioned previously, we do a webinar after we issue our topics, and that's your opportunity to hear from the program managers, discuss their topics briefly, and you can actually submit questions in advance or during the webinar. I would point out that many of you may have questions where you don't want to divulge what you're working on publicly, so that may not be the best forum, and you can, of course, just use the email addresses in the topics document to submit your questions directly to the program manager. A couple of new things for this year. We have implemented tech transfer opportunities. I'll talk a little more about that in just a second. And we have changed our maximum award amounts, and I'll go into more detail on that as well. So if you open up our topics document, on this slide, this is actually a very short topic, but many of them will probably be 2 to 3 pages. And this one, right at the top, there's the topic number, the topic name, and then finally the maximum award amount. Because our award amounts will vary by topic, you do need to pay attention and make sure that when you submit your budget that it matches the budget, the maximum award amount associated with your topic. This one actually only has 2 subtopics, subtopic A, and most but not all of our topics will also have an other subtopic. And the purpose of this is to sort of catch some out-of-the-box ideas. If your idea does not fit in a subtopic, but still fits in with the scope of the topic, so please read the section of the topic section. You can submit that under the other subtopic. And again, down below, I would say that we all typically provide references, not in all cases, of some recent publications that would help you catch up as to what's going on in the state of the art. We do get questions about the other subtopic, how many awards are made. I think for the last couple of years, about 9% of the awards have gone under the other subtopic. So it's not there. We do fund awards through the other subtopic. Here's an example of a tech transfer opportunity topic. There's really only one in Release 2, but I did want to point it out because it is very different. Again, as I mentioned before, our typical topic is the DOE program manager defining a topic area in which they're looking for you to define breakthroughs. The tech transfer opportunity is very different. What's happened here is DOE has funded research at a national lab, and that research has resulted in intellectual property, either patent applications or patents at that national lab. And this is an opportunity to leverage that intellectual property to drive innovation. So we're not looking for your essentially new idea at this point. We're looking for you to submit a proposal that says, I can take advantage of this technology and commercialize it, and you would draft an application that addresses that. So there are 2 contacts provided in a tech transfer opportunity topic. The first one is a laboratory contact. So here, the contact information in this example from Savannah River National Lab. If you have any questions about the tech transfer opportunity, what are the patent or patent applications involved, how much research was done by the lab and what reports would be available to you, then you would contact the lab with those questions. Any more sort of general or overview questions you could direct to the DOE program manager. As I mentioned, we did have changed the maximum award amount starting with FY13. So we'll actually have 2 maximum award amounts. And just to make sure you know which one, each topic has the maximum award amount associated with it listed in the topic. So we have the first one there, the $150,000 Phase 1 and $1 million Phase 2 is sometimes referred to as the guideline amounts issued by the Small Business Administration. The second one is 50% higher than that, at $225K and the $1.5 million. And again, these are decided by the DOE program managers based on the type of R&D that they're looking for. There may be some exceptions where we do actually have even larger amounts. In Release 2, you'll only see these 2 amounts. In Release 1, we did have one that was larger than both of those. Again, the funding opportunity announcement, again, those of you who are new applying to DOE funding, this basically contains all the rules relating to the eligibility, what's required in your application, how we will perform the review of your application, and some information regarding the award process as well. It is somewhat of a lengthy document. We would encourage you, if you've never applied before, to read through that. All the details are there. We realize not everybody takes the time to do that, and that's one of the reasons we hold this webinar. But you're still strongly encouraged to go through there. And again, it does change year to year. So, and what we're trying to do with this webinar is highlight some of those changes. When our funding opportunity announcement is out, and during this time before the applications are due, you are still permitted to have open communication with the DOE program managers. And again, finally, we typically have a webinar associated with each funding opportunity, like the one we're doing today. Again, the next step would be submitting a letter of intent. As to why we require a letter of intent, really the primary purpose is to allow our program managers to know the number and content of the applications they can expect. As soon as we get in the letters of intent, we will start assigning reviewers to those proposals. As a result of that, the most important part of your letter of intent really is, again, the topic and subtopic you're going to apply to and a technical abstract. What we're looking for you to do is provide enough information so that the DOE program manager understands the technology areas that you're working in so that they can assign suitable reviewers. So do provide that information. We also ask you to provide a list of collaborators, and the reason that collaborators are important is we don't want to assign reviewers from a collaborating institution. So if you're working with one of our national labs, we won't assign reviewers from that national lab. Again, and beyond that, we just need your contact information. Secondary purpose, and I think we get a lot of questions about this as well. Once we have your letter of intent and the program manager is reviewing it to assign reviewers, they will find some that appear to be non-responsive. And by non-responsive there, we typically mean that they've defined a certain topic area, and what you've submitted in their judgment is falling outside that topic area. Now, this is not a definitive assessment because you're only submitting an abstract. We won't make that assessment until you submit a full proposal. But we are trying to give you some feedback that if you appear to be outside the scope, so that you can, correct, and as you develop your full application, ensure that it does fall within the scope of the topic. If you receive this notification, it does not preclude you from submitting an application. You can still submit it. We're just trying to provide some guidance so that you pay close attention to what was asked for in the topic. I would also, tell you that if you appear to be responsive, we will not send you that response. We will only notify those who appear to be responsive. So once you submit we'll only notify if you're non-responsive. So if you don't hear feedback from your letter of intent, don't assume that we weren't interested in your application. Assume that we were, and go ahead and submit a full application. One of the things I do want to alert you to is we do have a limit of 10 letters of intent and therefore 10 applications per solicitation. And that's how we do the limits at DOE. I think we did receive questions in advance about, is there an annual limit? And again, we have no annual limits. We only do limits per each solicitation. And one of the other things that's new this year is that you will submit your letter of intent. For example, last year we allowed you just to email it to us, but now you'll actually put it right into our what's referred to as our Portfolio Analysis and Management System, or PAMS website. I've indicated the website here. I would encourage you to go to the funding opportunity announcement that provides more explicit directions on how to submit that. And again, this section is on the applications. I'll say a little bit about the resources available to you and the types of applications. And I'll talk specifically about our new Fast Track application. Probably the most important thing for people who have not applied for funding from the government before is that you must be aware that there are some registrations that you have to carry out. Applications for DOE and a few other agencies like NIH and Agriculture use grants.gov for folks to submit their applications. But there are three things you need to do. You need to obtain a DUNS number. That's from Dun & Bradstreet. You need to register with the System for Award Management. That's a federal government-wide system. Anybody applying to get funding from the government will need to do that. So those are the two things you need to do in advance of registering for grants.gov to submit your application. Now again, applications for Release 2 aren't due to the beginning of February, and some people tend to wait to the last minute to start this process, and I will just warn you that many of those folks don't end up submitting an application because they don't complete all these registrations in time. So even if you're just thinking about this or thinking about applying for the funding from the government in the future, there's no harm in just, for example, just getting your DUNS and SAM number right away. And again, we would encourage you also to do the registration with grants.gov now as opposed to when you're ready to submit the application. When you're filling out an application with grants.gov, you will actually just download what we refer to as an application package. It's actually a single PDF file which contains many documents, but you will just type a lot of the information directly into fields in that PDF and then submit that entire package. So the advantage of this is, versus say an online system, is that you can actually do it offline. You can just download the package and do that when you want. And then when you're finished with that, you would just upload the completed package into grants.gov. And the documents that you will need to do that is, again, our topics document, our funding opportunity announcement, and finally we do provide instructions on how to fill out a Phase 1 application. It goes into a little more detail, step-by-step instructions. So again, if you're very new to that, we would encourage you to look at that document. And that document is available on the DOE SBIR website. So again, the things that you will provide, and again, the most important is your project narrative. Again, I want to point out for FY13, we have imposed some limits on the page numbers and words for the project narrative. We found in the past that people were putting in lots and lots of material, things sometimes as long as 100 pages. That's not really necessary. I think you're really, you want to distill down your idea, and the plan that you have for executing it on, each of the phases into these kind of page limits. You also provide a budget and a budget justification, a list of your key personnel, and then the other important thing is you also provide commercialization plans. DOE requires that for both Phase 1 and Phase 2. I'd point out a Phase 1 commercialization plan can be very brief, only a couple pages. We do provide an example of what's included in that, again, on the link that's indicated on the web page. And again, that's fine. I did also want to point out what I would call the top 5 application errors. And just, again, if you're first time doing this, especially the first 3, which may prevent you from your application from even being reviewed. So again, as I mentioned previously, we have a lot of folks who try to do their SAM registration right before they submit their application and find out that there were some issues, and by the time that that's complete, the deadline is passed. So that's not an acceptable excuse to tell us that you ran into delays there. We advise you to start that early as possible. Again, we've just implemented the Phase 1 commercialization plan starting in FY12, so that's a new requirement. Some people aren't reading the funding opportunity announcement and realizing they must submit that. And particularly, you need to submit it in a certain field in the application, this field 12. And if that's not been submitted, again, we won't review your application. You'll just be administratively declined. And finally, we're not going to attempt to guess which topic and subtopic you plan to submit your application. Some people neglect to actually specify that topic and subtopic in their application. So we, please include that. And every time you put the title of your document in, please, include the topic and subtopic with that title. That will ensure that you don't fail to enter that. A couple other things we want you to pay attention to. One is what's referred to as the level of effort. There are, and I'll discuss that on the next slide, there are requirements. So for example, if you're applying for an SBIR award for Phase 1, you need to do 2/3 of the work at the small business. And we provide this worksheet so to make sure that the elements in your budget that show that 2/3 of the work that are being done at the small business is in fact reflected in your budget. So please take time to understand what level of effort means and how the different elements of your budget determine what work is being done at the small business, for example, versus the research institution or a subcontractor. The other problem we see is that the Department of Energy wants to make sure that we protect your proprietary information, but that requires you to mark it. So on your application, particularly in the project narrative where you typically have a lot of proprietary data, we need you to clearly mark that. And we provide instructions in the funding opportunity announcement on how to do that. So that requires you to put a text box on the front cover page of your application indicating you do have proprietary information, You also have to put a text box on every page that has proprietary information, in addition to clearly marking which of the data on that page is proprietary. So again, 5 things that I would encourage you to pay strong attention to. Again, the differences between SBIR and STTR. So one of the things I would point out that DOE does use the same topics for SBIR and STTR. In fact, your application, you can specify to SBIR, STTR, or both. Now, to submit to both, you have to meet the eligibility of both, and that's not always easy to do. I mean, not the eligibility, but the level of effort requirements. And down below, I've indicated what those are. So again, as I mentioned before, for SBIR, during phase 1, the small business must do 2/3 of the work, and for phase 2, you must do 50%. Now, that does mean that the other third in phase 1 or other half in phase 2 can be subcontracted out. Again, I think we've had some questions on that in the past. Working with even a large company, yes, you can have subcontracts out to a large business, for example, to collaborate with you on your work. For STTR, the requirements are different. The small business has to do 40% for both phase 1 and 2, but the research institution also needs to do 30% for both phase 1 and phase 2. For an STTR, again, as I mentioned, you must collaborate with a research institution. And one of the critical things that is required if you win an STTR award is to ensure that you've negotiated an agreement that covers the intellectual property and commercialization rights associated with IP that you're going to jointly develop. That's very important. Actually, we won't issue an award until you have an agreement in place. So if you're thinking of doing STTR, please, we do provide you with a model agreement. You can click on that link there to pull it up. That's also on our website. And get that started early and make sure you know what that is so it doesn't delay your award. For SBIR, another new provision by reauthorization, in the past, if you wanted to work with a federal lab, you really could only do that under STTR where they were the research institution. For this year, you can actually subcontract to a federal lab, both a DOE national lab or any other federal lab, to be a subcontractor. And so that is new. In the past, you had to get a waiver from the Small Business Administration to do that, and that's no longer required. Another new item we have is something we refer to as fast-track applications. So, for example, for this funding opportunity announcement, you can submit either a phase 1 or a fast track. And a fast track really is a combined phase 1, phase 2 application. As I mentioned before, our phase 1s are 9 months, phase 2 is 24 months. So your budget period for a fast track will cover all of that, or 33 months. And similarly, your project narrative would also cover the whole period. Because this includes both phase 1 and phase 2, we ask you to include the more detailed phase 2 commercialization plan. In terms of why we have this fast track application, I would point out that in our usual process, you complete your 9-month phase 1, and then you apply for a phase 2. Now, the time available for you to apply, for us to review it, and then for you to negotiate your award results in an approximately 5-month gap between phase 1 ending and phase 2 beginning. In order to eliminate that gap, we've used this fast track process. So at the end, toward the end of your phase 1, you would be submitting a continuation application to continue into phase 2, but there would be no funding gap in that case. I would point out, people do ask, well, how many fast tracks are going to be awarded? We've just started that this year, so we don't have any history on this to provide any guidance. We would point out that you do have to have a very compelling phase 1 and phase 2 application. In cases, for example, when you have very risky phase 1 research, so you're not sure what direction you're going to go in phase 2, that's probably not something you would want to submit as a fast track. Again, because of the requirement of a detailed phase 2 commercialization plan, also for folks who don't have that type of commercialization experience, you may not also want to submit to fast track. I would expect that, again, based on what we've seen from release 1, that it would be on the order of a few, maybe 5% of the awards might go out under fast track versus phase one. But again, we'll really have to wait to see the quality and the number of applications that come in for release 2. As I mentioned, toward the end of your phase 1 budget period, at the 7th month, you would submit a continuation application, which would be reviewed, and if approved, you would start your phase 2 right at the beginning of the 9th month. You will also have during the phase 2 budget period, you would also submit a second continuation application to start the second year of your phase 2 budget period. Okay. And just some questions just to avoid folks making mistakes. So these are spelled out in the funding opportunity announcement, but no, you can't sort of hedge your bets and submit both a phase 1 and a fast track. You must pick one or the other. Those are reviewed independently, so we only allow one to be submitted. And as I mentioned, we won't be able to really provide you any guidance on the numbers just yet without any historical data. I will also point out that not all our topics will accept fast track applications. I would say for release 1, we had most of them do so. Release 2, most of the topics are not accepting fast track applications. So do pay attention to that. In some cases, we even have had topics where it's fast track only. So that will be stipulated right in the title of the application. So please review that. Now, once you submit your application, the review and selection process begins. We try to assign at least 3 technical reviewers to your phase 1 application and phase 2 application. For the phase 2, in addition, that phase 2 commercialization plan, which is a little more detailed, is sent out for external review to a private sector reviewer with experience in commercialization. Our review criteria, which are equally weighted, you get a lot of questions on what are you looking for in the application. So again, it's fairly straightforward. A third relates to really essentially the idea that you're proposing. Is it novel? Compared to what we've seen in the state of the art, and is it compelling? The second one relates to the team that you've put together to execute the project. Even though one person may have the idea, we're still looking for you to put together the right group of people to execute both in the feasibility in phase 1 and the prototype in phase 2. So make sure you bring in, a solid team. You may want to collaborate, with a research university, a national lab, or another company to make sure you have all the right expertise in place to get the job done. And finally, the last third is on impact. So, that's really where we address, if you are successful, what is the impact, of this innovation? And again, in line with your authorization, we will notify of your decision, of a decision on your application within 90 days. And we do make reviewer comments available both to the awardees and those who are declined. In terms of who reviewers are for the Department of Energy, we do an external peer review. So we use about half of them are from DOE national labs, about a third from universities, and then the remainder from the private sector or other government labs. And again, here's our application award statistics. People want to know what their chances are. And so for phase 1 for last year, and these are statistics for releases combined for release 1 and 2 from last year. And again, so showing we received almost 2,000 applications and made about 250 phase 1 awards last year. And the pie chart shows that about 15% of those applications were awarded. I would also point out that another 15% were recommended for funding, but declined. Again, we are limited in the amount of funds that we have. We do expend all the funds that are set aside for every year, or I'll try to obligate those funds every year. Point out that about a little over half are not recommended funding based on the peer review process, and then another 15% are declined without review. And those declined without review are, as I mentioned before, are those administrative declines where you've left out an important element of your application and therefore we cannot perform a review, or your application was deemed non-responsive to the topic. it's our goal to try to reduce that, and we're hoping to use these letters of intent to provide you with guidance on at least eliminating those that are non-responsive. For phase 2, again, only phase 1 applicants can apply. The success rate here is 50%. I would note, again, the same thing, that not all phase 2 applicants are recommended for funding, and typically we do have some of those who are recommended, but because of funding limitations are not awarded. In DOE, we do have a fairly strict policy. When you apply for a phase 1, you will apply for example, if you applied for this year's phase 1 release 2, then the only time you will submit a phase 2 application is in next year's phase 2 release 2. There are not multiple opportunities to submit, and if you are declined when you apply, you do not have an opportunity to resubmit. So it's kind of a one-time through process going from phase 1 to phase 2. We do get a lot of questions, what are my chances if I've never applied to DOE before, and I just on this chart just wanted to point out that roughly between 15 and 20% of the awards we make for phase 1 every year are from people who've never applied to the DOE SBIR program. And award negotiation, if you are selected for award, you will receive a letter indicating that you will be working with our Chicago office to complete the negotiation, and your grant would start about 6 weeks after you receive that letter. I would ask you that we are trying to get those funds out to you as soon as possible, so please respond to our Chicago office in a timely fashion when they ask for any additional information to assist them in funding your grant. And finally, once you get started with your award, we do provide you with commercialization assistance. I would say for FY12, about 3/4 of the phase 1 awardees took advantage of that. We use a company, Dawnbreaker, to provide that assistance. During phase 1, they will do a commercialization readiness assessment to really understand your capabilities for commercializing the technology you're working on. And they will assist you with developing your phase 2 commercialization plan. That's really the primary focus of their effort, is to make sure that you understand, you've defined a path forward on how you're planning to commercialize the technology. During phase 2, there's a whole flexible menu of offerings to help you commercialize. Maybe depending on your path to market, whether you're planning to license or manufacture, there are a number of options available to you, and that link there will provide some additional information. I would also let you know that starting last year, we did provide the opportunity for companies to select their own commercialization assistance vendor. So if you have a consultant in your industry that you feel would provide better assistance, you're free to include them with your application. The one thing I would point out, you don't have to do anything to get the Dawnbreaker assistance. Once you're awarded, we will notify you that's available. If you want to use your own vendor, you need to include them with your application. So you can't do this after the fact, after you get an award. You must include this with your application. I do have some slides here on fraud, waste, and abuse. I think I won't go through them in a lot of detail. I'll let you give an opportunity to read through them, since I think we're running a little long here. But the one thing I want to point out right on this page, the most important thing you need to be aware of, again, this is for folks, I think in our opinion, most people have good intentions here, trying to do the right thing, but you may accidentally run into something, and that's, you can submit proposals for the same work to multiple agencies, but you need to let those agencies know that you've done that. So actually in your application form, if you submit an application, for example, to DOE and also to, for example, NSF, in your application you need to note that, and there's a place on the application form for you to indicate that yes, you have submitted a essentially similar application to another agency. And that allows us, when we make an award, to ensure that, you didn't get both an award from NSF and DOE to do the same work. That will be considered fraudulent behavior. And the Inspector General from our agency and the other agencies, will be looking for that and will prosecute you if they find that. So I just want to make sure that, again, we believe that most of you have good intentions. Please be aware of the restrictions that, when you're working with the government, that you are not taking the money, same money, taking additional money really to do what appears to be the same work. And again, there are, you will be prosecuted if anything like that happens. We do have an example, in the case, and this was not a case of a duplicative, somebody accidentally getting caught. This was somebody who was intentionally fraudulent. But again, please be aware of, that there are people, the inspector generals in the government, whose job it is to, look out for that type of fraud and prosecute it. So I think I won't say anything more there. Just a little bit on resources. So, I see we have received a large number of questions during the presentation, and I received a large number before the presentation for those who submitted online. And we'll take the rest of the time to kind of go through those questions. But if they're not answered today, if they're general questions, specifically related about the funding opportunity announcement and how to apply and things like that, please either email or call our office. This is the contact information right here. I'll leave that up for a little while. You're also free to dig around on our website to try to answer the question yourself. The Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy, who is participating in Release 2, does keep a listing of their questions and answers they've received, specifically for their technical topics. And I just wanted to point that out here, and that link will take you to that. But if you don't, like I said, get your question answered by the presentation today or the question you submitted, and again, I think because of a large number, we won't be able to get through through them all. Please, we are here to help, and so we'll address them if you submit them afterwards. I do have some other slides behind this, just regarding our website, to help you find things, and also on the SBIR.gov website. So we have a website. That's the link I provided on the previous slide. And I just wanted to make you aware that the Small Business Administration also has a website called SBIR.gov. And the main thing I want to point out, that it has a lot of general information about the programs, has contact information for all of the agencies that have SBIR programs. But probably the most important thing is that if you click on that solicitations menu item, and on the next page it'll show you what will come up. Here you can actually do a search on all the open solicitations, both DOE and any other agency, to find if there's a match between the kind of technology you work on and the open solicitations across 11 agencies. So I just wanted to make you aware of that as well. So, at this point, I think we will handle the questions. And maybe while we have that up, maybe we should actually go back to the slide with our contact information so that if anybody doesn't get their question answered, just to remember where you can go.
So, Manny, before you read off, we're going to go ahead and read some of those questions that were submitted during the registration process, and then we'll get to those questions that have been texted in via the chat box. And as you continue to submit those, we'll try to get those before the end of the webinar. But several questions are coming in during this. Yes, these slides will be available. Since you are listening right now and registered, you will automatically get a copy of the recorded presentation and the copy of the PDF slides emailed to you based on the email you provided during your registration. And also, this will be available on our website.
Okay, so let me start with some of the questions that were, again, submitted in advance. So one is, a project may be related to more than one subtopic. Is it possible to have some input on which subtopic is more appropriate? This is a question really related to our topics and whether the proposal you have fits within one subtopic or another. And in our topic document, as I mentioned, the email addresses of all the DOE program managers are provided. So when you look at that topic document and you have any questions like, gee, does this really fit with this subtopic, then you can draft an email to that program manager to get a response. We do ask you don't submit the same proposal really throughout to multiple subtopics. You really should find a fit for that proposal within the topic. We also had a question on the updates on the size rule. This refers to the Small Business Administration will be issuing by the end of December its updated size rule, and the size, these are size and eligibility rules, and that determines which companies are eligible. There will be some changes in those rules because they, as part of reauthorization, will discuss whether companies, for example, that are majority owned by multiple venture capital, hedge fund, and private equity firms can apply going forward. So I can't really comment other than those updated size rules will be issued or are planned to be issued by the end of December. So you should see something from that. Next question, are collaborations with foreign universities allowed? I did see some online questions as well asking about foreign participation. The SBIR and STTR programs are domestic R&D programs. All of the research and development must be done in the United States, or its territories. So there really is no provision for doing foreign collaboration where the research, some of the research will be done in a foreign country. Are colleges and universities allowed to compete for SBIR and STTR? Again, the SB at the front of these programs means small business, so only small businesses can apply for these awards. Again, it's a small business set-aside, so that only they can apply. Now, certainly colleges and universities can partner with small businesses on either the SBIR or STTR programs, and they would generally be listed as subcontractors. We do not make awards. We only make our awards to the small businesses. Any collaborations you have to be worked as a subcontract to you. Okay. We had one, are we required to contribute some percentage of matching funds? Again, there for the regular phase 1, phase 2, there are no matching fund requirements. Can a sole proprietor participate? Can only corporations participate? The way you've structured your small business is not a concern as long as you meet the eligibility requirements in terms of ownership and size. So you can be a sole proprietor, partnership, limited liability corporation, however you want to structure that. People have asked for sample applications, particularly a sample application of a winning proposal. Unfortunately, we cannot really provide those applications. Again, just so that you know how we handle your application. If you submit an application to us, it is treated as certainly confidential, proprietary. Our reviewers, will acknowledge that if they perform a review, that they cannot disclose any of that information. And unless you win an award, we will actually never disclose that you even submitted an application to us unless you've indicated that we can do so. So we may tally the number of applicants that we got, but we do not really disclose any information related to your application, and all of that is protected. So getting a long answer to my question, so no, we really can't release other sort of winning applications really to provide some assistance. And again, we do have, I would also point out, we have very different types of topics. Some that are looking for more longer term, breakthroughs, other things that are a little more applied in nature. So I'm not sure that even if we had one or two, they would be representative of the, variety. So you do need to tune your application, to the topic. Let's see. We do have some questions about budgets for STTR programs and things like sequestration and things like that. What's going to happen in the future of SBIR programs? As I noted at the beginning, these programs are funded as a percentage, in the case of DOE, of DOE's extramural R&D budget. And so, yes, again, depending on what happens in Congress and what funds are appropriated to the department, that will affect, our funding levels. So again, until really that's all settled for each fiscal year, we don't really know our budgets, until that time. We had a question about, does a long track record of successful SBIR projects give you a heads up on upcoming SBIR work? I really wasn't sure the nature of the question. So, we do look at, on one part, we do look at your commercialization history, when we start to look at the, making a decision to fund your award. That certainly is, a review criteria on the potential impact of your technology, if you've been successful at translating R&D into commercialization. that would be weighted there. In terms of getting a heads up on upcoming SBIR work, we would encourage you to go to our website and join our mailing list. I think most of you here are. If you're not, join our mailing list, and we will send you an email anytime new topics or new funding opportunity announcements are issued. And a question about grants.gov registration assistance for small businesses. And again, you would normally go to grants.gov to receive that assistance. They have their own help desk to help you with working with grants.gov. Another question, how does one get a suggested topic in the topics document? So just to let you know, if a company actually had the ability to put in a topic, that would look a little unfair in terms of having a competition to award R&D funds. So we don't allow companies to submit topics. What we would encourage you to do if you're working in a particular R&D area, say for example you're working on fossil energy, and there's a topic that's close but not exactly what you're working on, but you think what you're working on is very relevant, fits within the mission of our Office of Fossil Energy, I would contact the topic manager in one of the topics that is close, explain what you're doing, see if they would accept it under their other subtopic if it's close. And if not, certainly the topic manager can consider that when they develop their topics for the next funding opportunity announcement. So that's really your best means of providing input, into how the Department of Energy selects its topics. I had a question on funding levels for STTR versus SBIR. And again, the funding amounts are really the same. They only vary by topic. I had a question here relating to, when applying for funding, what if you already have a working prototype or in the development stage? Again, as I pointed out at the very beginning, the SBIR program is targeted at really early stage R&D, really moving it from idea, through feasibility, through prototype. If you've already gone through those stages, then really you've passed the point of really applying for SBIR. We really don't fund, through phase one, which is the point where you come in, assistance in, commercializing research. And we also do not fund demonstration projects. I got a question, I'm nearly ready to submit my letter of intent. Will I get an earlier reply regarding responsiveness than if I wait till the due date? And unfortunately there, just with all the other work in our office, we're still working on release one. The answer is no. So there's no added benefit. We certainly would encourage you, especially if you haven't registered on PANS yet, to go ahead and submit your letter of intent. So we have gotten some very specific questions related to specific technologies. And again, in those cases, I would encourage you to contact, find the closest topic in our topic document and contact the DOE program manager to ask questions related to, whether those topics are a good fit. One question about the letter of intent in terms of when will we get feedback regarding non-responsiveness. And that will be within 3 weeks of when you submit by the due date. So 3 weeks after December 17th, you should hear back from us regarding non-responsiveness. Got a question on fairly detailed. So this is there a limit for PI contractor hourly rate? There's no limit as specified in our funding opportunity announcement. We do expect those rates to be reasonable and reflect kind of the industry rates. That is something that if it does look out of line, our Chicago office, if selected for award, will work with you on that. I've got a question about limitations on buying equipment, hardware, software, if you do receive a grant. You are allowed to purchase equipment and the materials and supplies with your grant, and those are separate budget categories. Your equipment in particular should not look excessive. Again, for a $150,000 grant, certainly things in the 10% range or below are probably very acceptable. When you start to get much larger, it really needs to be very justified. We would rarely, I think, would never see anything where the equipment budget is a large fraction of the total funding budget. That type of very large equipment, you should probably be collaborating with somebody to get access to that type of equipment. Let's see. Yeah, we got a question about the SBA policy directive and its implementation. Policy directive provides, again, general guidance to the federal agencies and even small businesses on the operation of the SBIR and STTR programs. The Small Business Administration issued the policy directives in August, on August 6th. It went out for public comment. The public comment period is closed. They do anticipate revising the policy directive based on the public comment. I don't have any dates from that. I would expect the revised policy directives perhaps to be issued, toward the end of the first quarter of next year or early second quarter. We did get a question on the minimum number of pages an application has to be. There really is no minimum, but we do expect enough proposals so that it can be reviewed. So we're not really looking, just for somebody to sketch out an idea. You do need to provide some supporting data on justifying why you think that's feasible. So we are looking for a technical R&D proposal, not just a concept or an idea. So I think those were some, not all of the other, the submitted questions. Some of them were more technical in nature, and I would encourage you to send those directly to the topic managers. So we had a question here. Can a small business contact the DOE program manager throughout the entire process, or is there a point where program managers should not be contacted? And again, up until the time you submit your application, that's fine to talk to DOE program managers. After you've submitted your application, again, certainly once we've begun the review and selection process, you really should not have any communication with the program manager regarding your application. So another question regarding partnering with a Canadian company in regard to conducting field testing in Canada. Again, going back to my earlier comment, the work needs to be domestic. Now, there are exceptions. We have made, some exceptions in the past, for example, where somebody needed to use a nuclear reactor to do an experiment, and the only reactor in the world that was capable of doing that was in Canada. And so we do make exceptions, but they need to be justified. It cannot be just a matter of convenience. It has to be a very unique situation. We got another question on partnering with a large U.S. company. Yeah, there are no restrictions on who you partner with regard to whether your partners are universities, other small businesses, large businesses, as long as you meet the level of effort requirement. Your partners can also be non-U.S. companies, provided that in terms of their ownership, provided that the work is done, here in the United States. We got another question related to the type of corporation you're going to form if you're just starting up and applying for an SBIR. So there are two things here. So one, when you submit an application, at that point you don't have to meet the eligibility requirements. So for example, let's say you're working in a large corporation and you have an idea and you want to use that idea to start a small company. You can submit the idea in the application. You would submit it as a small business, but the small business does not have to be formed and until the time of award. As I mentioned, that's typically about 6 weeks after you're notified of the award. So there is time to do all of that. And, again, one of the purposes of the SBIR and STTR programs is to encourage small business formation. So you can do that. Again, we got a question: is non-responsiveness on the letter of intent based solely on the technical concept, or are the technical business qualifications of the team considered? At the LOI stage, we're really primarily looking at the technical fit of the proposal with the topic area. again, you're not submitting the qualifications of your team. So you're not submitting a document indicating the qualifications of the principal investigator and key members of the research team. We will only see that during the proposal. So the LOI, we're really just looking at the fit with the topic. All right, we've got some very specific questions here on limitations on overhead and general administrative cost. This is kind of a very important area in the sense that we do have a lot of problems when we have, particularly startup companies, try to negotiate their awards, and the principals of the companies are typically technical folks and not people with business backgrounds. So generally, your overhead rates, you would fall into one of two categories. If you've worked with the government before and if you've gotten a number of awards, you've probably been audited by an organization referred to as DCAA, and they would have audited you and provided you with your overhead rates, your indirect cost rates, let me put it that way. And so you would normally submit those with your application. If you are unsure, or for example, you're a completely new business, you have no history on all that, and you're not sure how to do all that, we do put out a document. We do provide a document on the model for indirect rates. So if you're unfamiliar with that, you do need to educate yourself about that, and you do need to just, properly justify your indirect rates. We do run into problems with small businesses just throwing anything down, and then when it comes time to negotiate their award, they need to adjust those rates, and when they adjust those rates, they realize that they can't put the same number of PI hours or can't justify all the materials or equipment they wanted to provide, and ends up really dramatically impacting your whole proposal. We're not really looking for those kind of impacts to happen once you've been selected for award, because it may actually, in fact, jeopardize whether that should go forward if there have been dramatic changes to your budget. So do put in some time for those of you who are new to creating a small business. You do need to read about that. We are trying to work in the future to create some recorded webinars to educate you in those areas. But I think there are plenty of books available and probably even some web-related resources in this area. And we will be providing some of those resources in the future. We got a question here. Sometimes program managers are busy, so if program managers do not reply or email, what should we do? And that's a good question. Again, most of the program managers in the Department of Energy aren't working exclusively on SBIR. They're managing the other 97% of their funds, and often out of the office at conferences and so on. And a lot of you are looking for a very quick turn because it may affect your application. So one of the reasons we provide that feedback on the letter of intent, that idea that it's not responsive, so what we advise you to do is go ahead and submit the letter of intent. Describe your project on the letter of intent. When the program manager does begin assigning reviewers, he will at that point provide us with feedback on the ones that appear to be non-responsive. So at that point you will also get the feedback even if you are unable to contact the program manager prior to submitting your letter of intent. We got a question here, can you skip phase 1 and go to phase 2? And the answer to that is no, not in DOE. There was a provision of reauthorization that allowed just a few of the agencies to pilot programs in that area, but by statute, only phase 1 awardees can apply for phase 2. It is a phased program. Another question here, if we're still working out the bugs in our prototype, can we still apply for phase 1? Yeah, and again, this notion of going through feasibility through prototype, is kind of a general overview. R&D is not always so cut and dried as to what is feasibility and what is prototype. You're still often working on feasibility aspects, even in important elements of your prototype. So there is no hard line. If you're really in this early stage R&D, yes, you may have already done some work. You may have done some modeling and simulation. You may have done some experiments or even built some preliminary proof of concepts. That's all fine. You're still eligible to apply for SBIR and STTR. Are there sample letter of intent available? Actually, no, we don't have that, but if we go back to the slide we presented, it'll probably far back we couldn't get to it. It really is that straightforward. There's not a lot of content. Actually, if you go in and register in PAMS and submit the letter of intent, most of the information in the letter of intent. Here, let's see, we'll find it. It's right there. Oops, past it, I think. Letter 26. So here we've listed on the right what's required. All that information, there actually, when you go into our PAM system, there will be fields, and it will tell you what to put in those fields. The only thing that you need to upload in the PDF, which is not currently a field, is actually the, I believe, the abstract. I'm not sure if the list of collaborators is in there. It's escaping me on the top of my head. So look in there, but all of that information right there, if it's not a field in the PAM system, you should submit that. So mostly what you're not going to put in directly in a field is the abstract. You may have to submit the list of collaborators. And then you also need to indicate phase 1 or fast track, because that's currently not a field. We just implemented fast track, and we'll have that up next year as a field, but right now it's not there. Am I correct in assuming that figures and tables are not included in the phase 1 15-page limit? No, you would be incorrect. So the 15 pages includes your whole project or technical narrative. So that includes your references and everything else. Now, I would say that a lot of the other supporting documents, so documents such as if you have a research report that you've worked on this previously, if you have all the PI qualifications, letters of support, subcontractor, budget justifications, all this other supporting document is not part of the project narrative. The project narrative really spells out what's your idea, how are you going to execute, what's your plan to execute an idea, who are the people involved, and what's the impact of what you're doing. But that 15-page limit, for example, for phase 1 does include all of that. Again, somebody just said, did you just say the collaborator list is required in the letter of intent? Yes, that is required. And again, because we use the letter of intent to assign reviewers, so for example, if you were collaborating with Ohio State University, we would not get any reviewers from Ohio State University. That's why we need to know who your collaborators are. We plan to, there's another question, we plan to collaborate with a professor at a university to carry out some modeling. Will he be considered a consultant or subcontractor? So this is kind of a gray area as to whether you call somebody a consultant or a subcontractor. Generally, if somebody is performing a large fraction of the R&D or a significant fraction of the R&D, they will be a subcontractor. With a subcontractor, you have to provide a letter of commitment from the subcontractor. You have to supply a separate budget for the subcontractor and a justification for that budget. So those are typically going to be larger things. If somebody's providing some guidance or advice, for example, the commercialization assistance provider could be somebody who would come in as a consultant. And again, for a consultant, you only need to provide a letter of commitment from the consultant, and that letter of commitment would reflect the amounts that are in your that you've provided in your budget. But you do not need to provide a separate budget from a consultant or a separate budget justification. We got another question here. Is there a significant difference in the approval percentage when a consultant is used to complete the application? That really is not something that we flag in the or mark in the in the application, and therefore is not considered in the review process. Can a small business use a foreign supplier for some of its projects? So, for example, if they use software program for a significant portion of analysis that was developed by a foreign country, would this disqualify them? No. Again, the domestic work, the R&D must be completed here. So if you buy materials and supplies or equipment that is foreign, I think you are certainly encouraged to use domestic sources where available, but that does not disqualify you from applying for the grant. Another question here. Oops, sorry. So we have a few questions here. Let's see. No cost sharing required. The PI can do any amount of the work. we do actually currently have a minimum amount of work that the principal investigator must do. And then for phase 1, that's 3 hours a week on average. Doesn't have to be every week. But there is no essentially maximum amount that the PI can do. That's the question. With regard, there's another question, will there be more tech transfer opportunities in 2013? At this point, there are no more phase 1 solicitations anticipated at this time. Things may change if something happens with final appropriations, that might change, but at this time, there's no plan to issue any more phase 1 funding opportunity announcements, and therefore no more TTOs. It says, I've got another question here. Is the department currently leaning toward one sector versus another? Not sure exactly what you're aiming at there. Our topics are funded by, individual DOE program offices, and it's their R&D budgets that determine really how many awards they will make under, their topics. So there's no real leaning. In fact, so if you want to think about it, it's the appropriations that each of the DOE program offices receive from Congress that determines their, SBIR and STTR R&D budgets, and therefore the number of awards that will be made in that technology area. We had another question, does a technology's patent status influence the potential of the award? Again, that's, I would say in general, no, it's not a requirement that you have a patent for you to submit an application. Again, you can submit something really at the idea stage with no patent or patent application in place, and that's fine, and that won't necessarily work against you. Certainly something like an issued patent, has undergone some review and indicating that what you've done is novel, and that might support you, but generally there's no penalty for doing that. Now, having said that, we would encourage you to protect your innovations and to learn about the patent process and do something called a provisional patent application, which is fairly low cost to protect your ideas with the patent office. Another question, will DOE allow large entity-owned firms to apply or keep the traditional program goals? Let me do that. I think the first half of the question will allow large entity-owned firms to apply. So the eligibility requirements, this is getting really into the details of the eligibility requirements. We have an entire page on that in the funding opportunity announcement as to what your ownership structure is. So I can't, based on the information you provided here, I won't give an answer. You must meet those ownership requirements, and currently the way they're structured, you must be 51% owned by individuals who are U.S. citizens or permanent residents, or owned by one company, at least greater than 50%, who is also 51% owned by individuals who are U.S. citizens or residents. I would encourage you to go to our funding opportunity announcement to look in detail at the ownership requirements if you have some concerns about that. And if that still doesn't clarify it, please contact us, or you can go directly to the Small Business Administration. In many cases, we refer you to them because it is their size and eligibility rules that determine whether you can participate.
So Manny, we have time for just a few more questions, so we'll start to wrap this up here. Let's see if we can get some that are very quick.
Yeah, we've already answered that.
Did we answer that?
Here you've indicated you don't do demonstration funding. If I have an algae biomass to fuel full-scale up demonstration to commercial scale, would that qualify for funding? And generally, yeah, that is much later stage than what SBIR is intended for. So we're not going to take your demonstration plant and assist you with funding a commercial scale plant. For biomass, I would encourage you to talk to our biomass program and look for funding opportunities there. Again, the SBIR program doesn't fund that, but that does not mean that individual DOE program offices won't fund demonstration and commercial scale efforts. Do submissions for other subtopics receive the same peer review as the ones for the specific subtopics? And the answer there is yes. There's no difference in the review process. I would say the same thing is true for tech transfer opportunities versus regular and non-tech transfer. They're all going to undergo the same external peer review process. Okay, this might be our last question. Are there any provisions for challenging a reviewer's assessment of a Phase 2 proposal? We're aware of such a review in which a reviewer's comments were totally out of context. So the rules, and again, DOE does grants. If you do a contract, there are provisions to protest a contract, but in a grant, if you're not happy with your reviewer's comment, there is no equivalent protest process to protest a grant because you didn't like your reviewer's comments. Now, what I would say is, we still want to hear from you if you feel that your reviewers, two things I want to add to that. So I think some people are of the impression that if you get one bad review, then you're sunk and you can't be awarded. That is not the case. So the way the proposals are evaluated, we, again, typically send them to 3 reviewers. A DOE program manager reads those reviews and makes their recommendation for funding. Again, if you have 2 strong reviews and somebody does seem to be not fully understand what you proposed and are making comments that aren't, relevant, but still scored you low, the program manager can still choose to fund you. So you should understand that it's not just a simple numerical score and there's no recourse. So we do provide that ability for DOE program managers to make an intelligent decision based on their reading of the reviews. We do want to hear from you if you do find bad reviewer. We will forward that to the program manager, for their consideration in assigning reviewers in the future. But yeah, there is no equivalent protest or appeal process if you're unhappy with your review. And I would also point out that we fund, as I mentioned at the very beginning of the presentation, for example, we fund 15% of the approximately 15% of the applications. I mentioned there's another 15% who don't get funded who already had strong, were recommended for funding. So even if you weren't happy with your reviews, you may just end up, in that second group, which was recommended for funding but not awarded. So, again, I think we're going to have to close there. Thanks for everybody who participated today. Hopefully, you found something that was useful for pursuing an application with DOE. And again, if your questions weren't answered, please submit them to the phone number and email address that was provided.
And this concludes our webinar. Thank you very much.